why don't we start by introducing ourselves? Representative Templeman, I'll begin with you.
Okay.
And we'll go around the room.
David Templeman, Orleans 3, that's Brownington, Barton, and Westmore. I had to think about it.
Charles Wilson, Caledonia 3, which is Lindenville, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and Newark.
Henry Pearl, I represent the towns of Danville, Peacham, and Caddy.
Ed Lipsky, Lamoille 1, Stowe.
Rodney Graham, Orange 3, Williams County, Trust.
David Durfee, Bennington 3, which is Shaftesbury, Sunderland, and Glastonbury.
Heather Supernut, Windsor 4, which is Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford.
John O'Brien, Windsor Orange 1, which is Royalton and Windsor, and Umbridge and Orange.
Hi, Grace. Bennington Rutland District, Danby, Dorset, Langrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
Josie Levitt, Grandal Chittenden, Grandal County, and a sliver of West Milton.
All right, and we have Sidonia in the corner running the show for us, and we've got Maddie now joining us on Zoom. Hi, Maddie. And I understand, Ivy, you don't have anything that we need to be looking at, so we can just focus on what you got to say, and then if there's time and we have questions, which we probably will, we'll jump in. So, and are you going to tag team with Maddie, or are you going to start and then at some point turn it over to her?
Yeah, so I think I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Maddie to cover ag stuff.
Well, let's hear if you want to just give us tell us who you are for the record and a little bit about your background if you would like, and then, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Ivy Enoch. I'm the SNAP Policy and Training Lead at Hunger Free Vermont. I've been in my position for almost 4 years, so still feel a little bit like a new, but can't quite claim that title still. I think you all are familiar with Hunger Free Vermont as an organization, but we are a statewide anti-hunger advocacy and education organization really focused on ending the injustice of hunger for everyone in Vermont. And we do that really by centering the voices of those most impacted by hunger in our state to enact permanent systemic change. So as part of my role at Hunger Free Vermont, I have the delight of being our quote unquote expert on Farm Bill, specifically the nutrition title of the Farm Bill. So that's really what I'm here to talk with you all about. I'll start with kind of a general overview of what the Farm Bill is, probably information that you all are very familiar with, and then I'll be focusing on Title IV, which is the nutrition title. And then my colleague Maddie at NOFA Vermont will be covering the ag-related titles of the Farm Bill. So I'm sorry I don't have visuals to share with you all today, but Teddy shared 2 documents ahead of this meeting. The first was a set of priority recommendations that the Farm Bill Nutrition Coalition put together last year, and I'll be touching on that a little bit later. And then the second was just what I think a really helpful primer of the Farm Bill and the nutrition title specifically that was put together by Feeding America and the Food Research Action Center, 2 really great national partners of ours. So I do have notes in front of me. I'm happy to provide those notes after this meeting, but most of what I'm sharing, if not all, is represented in those 2 documents. So we can start chatting about the Farm Bill. It is a comprehensive piece of federal legislation that authorizes most of the federal policies governing nutrition and agriculture programs. And roughly every 5 years, Congress reauthorizes the Farm Bill, which offers policymakers an opportunity to consider programmatic changes and address issues that may have come up since prior reauthorization. So the current Farm Bill that we're operating under was authorized in 2018, which means that, as we all know, reauthorization should have occurred in 2023. However, Congress passed a 1-year extension of that 2018 Farm Bill at the end of last year because they ran out of time to fully reauthorize the entire package. So what is typically, a 5-year period of authorization, we're kind of in year 6 of that. The Farm Bill itself is broken down into 12 different titles, and each title encompasses really broad categories that address different programs. So again, I'm here to talk about the nutrition title, which is Title 4, that addresses different federal nutrition programs. And then Maddie will talk about the agricultural titles of the Farm Bill. And I'll just start by sharing that Hunger Free Vermont is the convening organization of the Vermont Farm Bill Nutrition Coalition, which is made up of a number of different food security organizations across the state, including the Food Bank, NOFA Vermont, the Area Agencies on Aging, as well as legal advocacy organizations, farmers and growers, food retailers, school partners, and many more. And so the coalition convenes roughly every 5 years with that Farm Bill reauthorization schedule. And the objective of the coalition really is to develop a set of unified policy priorities related to the nutrition title to deliver to our congressional delegation. So they have a strong set of priority recommendations they can feel confident in, knowing that, these were developed by many voices in Vermont. We all stand behind them. And last year, when we were finalizing or really developing our recommendations, we worked very closely with hundreds of community members, individuals across the state of Vermont to hear from them what their priorities were as lived experts in participating in or navigating these federal nutrition programs, as well as service providers who help folks actually apply for and maintain their federal nutrition benefits, and then folks who may experience hunger, but for a variety of different reasons do not participate in federal nutrition programs. And so our final set of priority recommendations, which I did share, were delivered to our delegation in February of last year. And then the coalition worked really closely with them throughout 2023 in support of their marker bills. So Title 4, the nutrition title, houses a number, but not all, of the federal nutrition programs in our country. And so I'll just highlight the key programs that are most relevant to Vermont in the nutrition title. So the biggest program of the Farm Bill as a whole is SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. States can choose to use that federal name, SNAP, or choose their own name for the program. So here in Vermont, SNAP is known as 3 Squares Vermont. Folks use those names interchangeably, but both refer to the same program. It is a program that gives people who qualify money or benefits every month on what's called an electronic benefits transfer card, or an EBT card, which looks and works just like a debit card. And that can be used to purchase eligible food items at more than 600 retailers in Vermont, at more than farmers markets and farm stands. And again, benefits can only be used to purchase grocery items. So the federal government pays the full cost of those SNAP benefits and splits the cost of administering the program with states who ultimately operate the program. So in Vermont, the Department for Children and Families Economic Services Division administers SNAP. And while states do have some flexibility over certain eligibility requirements through USDA options, most of the rules governing SNAP eligibility requirements can only be changed through congressional action, through Farm Bill reauthorization. I just wanted to share a few numbers of what 3 Squares Vermont participation looks like in Vermont. It is the most effective anti-hunger program that we have in the country and here in Vermont, because it gives people money every month to buy the groceries that are right for them and their families, and at a time that is right for them, at grocery stores that they are familiar with. So in Vermont, more than 40,000 households participate in this program. And of those households, over 68,000 individuals participate, more than 20,000 children, more than 17,000 older adults. So this is a program that benefits tens of thousands of our friends and neighbors, community members, but it also supports our entire economy as a whole because it keeps on average $13 million every month in our state, supporting our local farmers and growers, our business owners. So not only is it an effective anti-hunger program, it's a very effective economic stimulus program. There are other Title IV nutrition programs, of course. So SNAP Ed is in the nutrition title. This is a nutrition education program for SNAP eligible people. So folks don't actually have to be participating in SNAP to get the benefits of SNAP Ed. So in Vermont, SNAP Ed is administered by the Economic Services Division in partnership with the Vermont Department of Health. And the Vermont Department of Health collaborates with 6 community-based organizations in our state to implement different projects. One example is the Vermont Food Bank's VT Fresh program, which supports kind of inspiring information, sharing information about ways to incorporate fresh fruits and vegetables into folks' diets. There are a number of other essential programs in Title IV charitable food programs. So TFAP, or the Emergency Food Assistance Program, provides food at no cost to eligible individuals. And TFAP is carried out in Vermont by the Vermont Food Bank and about 80 of their network partners. And so the food provided by TFAP is sourced from U.S. farms and is often shelf-stable, canned, or dried foods, but can also be fresh or frozen foods. And in 2023, last year, 1.4 million pounds of food were distributed through the TFAP program through the Vermont Food Bank and their network partners. So it is another very essential program for Vermonters. CSFP, this is, just like a bit of alphabet soup here. That's what the nutrition title is. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program. It provides boxes of food to people 6 years or older who meet income guidelines. And these boxes are packed and distributed again by the Vermont Food Bank and their partners at about 160 plus sites around the state. These boxes are delivered every month to about 1,800 individuals. And the foods included in this box are set by the USDA, a standard set of food based on nutritional guidelines, et cetera. I'm going to highlight 3 other programs.
Excuse me, we will have questions, and if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, Representative O'Brien?
Just so I'm not confused, this is different than the Veggie Van Go. What you were just talking about?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Different types of foods in different boxes, which go to families.
Yes, it's a different program. That's not my area of expertise, but we do have a fabulous partner in the room. Carrie, Mr. Chair, if you would let me.
Well, I think you answered the question, so why don't we, I think we can go on, but we may invite Carrie to the witness.
Okay, great.
If we have other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And good question. There are a number of different federal programs that operate in our state, and there are state programs that operate in our state, and some of them overlap, some of them do not. So I appreciate the question.
Maybe while you pause, can you say a little bit more about what's in those boxes?
The USDA CSFP boxes.
Go to the 260 plus.
Yeah, so they're typically bulk food items, so staple pantry items. There are also dairy products, so it's a range of things. Yeah, that's what I'll share, kind of staple food products.
Government cheese. But it's good. Canned veggies. It's like a whole little month's worth of nutrition in a box.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 3 local food access programs within Title IV that I'll highlight. The Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program provides funds to elementary schools with higher numbers of low-income students to serve fresh fruits and veggies for snacks during the school day. This is a really joyful program. It is wonderful. It's widely popular in Vermont. The total allocation of that program for Vermont in FY24 is roughly $2.75 million. And this is a program that in some cases can fund snacks for the year for a school. So it's again, very celebrated and very effective. The Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program supports the purchase of fresh fruits and vegetables at farmers markets and farm stands for older income eligible folks. So in Vermont, NOFA Vermont receives funding to operate the Senior Farm Share Program. And then Economic Services Division operates the Farm to Family Coupon Program, which gives older adults coupon booklets during the summer months to buy fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. And then the last one I'll highlight is the Finney GUSNIP program. Again, alphabet soup here. The Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentive, or Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program. This supports, again, the purchase of fresh fruits and vegetables at farmers markets and grocery stores for SNAP participants exclusively. So this is a SNAP incentive program. In Vermont, NOFA Vermont operates a program called Crop Cash, which is, I see a lot of head nods. It's widely popular. It's an incredibly effective SNAP incentive program that matches SNAP dollars 1-for-1 up to a certain amount that stretches SNAP participants' food budgets to buy local, nourishing fruits and vegetables from their local farmers. So again, really effective program for participants. It also is a really important program for our farmers and our growers. So there are a couple of additional programs embedded within Title IV that are not relevant to Vermont. For example, the food distribution program on Indian reservations that is only for federally recognized tribes. So I want to highlight that I'm not sharing all of the programs within Title IV. I've shared most of them, and the ones that I have shared are incredibly important to our state. So when Farm Bill reauthorization comes up, that's of course why the coalition comes together to get a sense of, what's really working in the state of Vermont related to these programs and what's not working, and addressing those pinch points so we can share those with the delegation to hopefully improve these programs that are so important to Vermonters.
Levitt, and then
Just a quick question. So where are we with the federal delegation or the feds in general about getting this reauthorized, the Farm Bill?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I shared, we're operating under a 1-year extension of the 2018 Farm Bill to ensure there wasn't lapsing in, the appropriations of these and the authorization of these programs. So Congress has another year.
A full year. They have all of 2024?
They have until September, the end of the federal fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah. What we are hearing is that there's a great intention to authorize the Farm Bill, but by May or July. So that's the timeline that we're hearing right now.
Representative Graham.
On the SNAP program or PPT cards, or whatever you want to call them, are there any regulations on what type of food products you can purchase with them?
Yes, it is heavily regulated.
I get behind people that use these cards, their cards are full of soda, junk.
So one of the reasons why the SNAP program is an incredibly effective anti-hunger program is that it gives people the autonomy of choice to buy the groceries that are right for them and their families, gives them the dignity of choice to buy the groceries that they want and need. It is a heavily regulated list of food items. So it's very different from the WIC program in that people don't have to restrict their purchases to specific brands of food, but people can only purchase eligible food items such as, dairy alternative products, meat alternative products, breads, grains, and cereals, snacks, candy, soda, food items. So folks, of course, cannot purchase household goods or tobacco or alcohol, things like that.
It just kind of seems to me like we're giving people money to buy sugar saturated drinks. And then we're gonna have to turn around and pay healthcare costs because we got a health problem. It just seems like it's foolish.
Representative Levin.
I'm gonna push back a little, Representative Graham. Yes, people can buy soda. And there's also nothing wrong with someone having a soda. And most people who I work with at my food shelf don't buy soda. They buy food they can cook. They buy eggs, they buy bread, they buy cereal for their kids. They do occasionally buy a candy bar because sometimes they can't afford to make a birthday cake for someone. But these people are not, and we have snacks on our food shelf, and that's the section that people skip over in favor of other high-value nutrition items. So I feel like that's a little bit of a myth, that people just buy, crappy food and sugary food.
So I'm gonna push back. I've been behind people and well, I see it.
Yeah, and I think that.
And there may not be wide range.
I mean, some people don't eat well, and some people, especially if you are a recovering addict, you are going to go right for the sugar because that helps you with your urges. So there are reasons why people do load up on sugar, and not everyone is going to buy great. I mean, how many of us in here eat perfectly well?
So let me just interrupt. Remind everyone here that we only have a limited time with our witness and want to be sure that we hear information that she has to share with us. And I think that is certainly a valid point to understand that sugar is not excluded, or soft drinks, candy. I know that there's good arguments perhaps for not including some of those things on a list. And there are foods that we might think are perfectly, loaded with good nutrition that you can't purchase with your 3 Squares card. Hot foods, for example. None of this is under our control. Just it's the other thought that I have, and it's all federal. But if it's okay with the committee, unless you've got something really critical to add here, Representative O'Brien.
I just wondered, while we're talking about this, where does school nutrition come into the Farm Bill? I know we've heard it's connected to it, but not necessarily policy-wise passed out there, just because we'll get all the way down. It's like, what are the chances of, say, getting whole milk back into schools?
Mm-hmm. Great question. It is an entirely different reauthorization. And same with WIC, which is, again, another really effective federal nutrition program for children. That is reauthorized through the child nutrition reauthorization process. So both school nutrition and other federal nutrition programs like WIC are authorized through a separate process.
So not part of the Farm Bill.
Not part of the Farm Bill.
School. I was. All right. Would you like to continue?
I'm open for questions at this point.
Okay. Representative Bryce.
I don't know. I know Maddie's here and Crop Cash is administered by NOFA, but it sounded like Maddie was maybe going to move on to more of the sort of ag part of the Farm Bill. So whoever is best sort of suited to answer this, it's great. I just would love to hear I know there was a situation with Crop Cash this year with essentially the funds running out before some community partners maybe thought they would, and so have heard that in my community and just would love to hear about it here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering, Maddie, as it's a program of NOFA. Okay, awesome. I don't want to speak on NOFA's behalf, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Ivy, and thanks, Representative Rice, for the question. Yes, what you have heard is true, that the funding for our Crop Cash program, which has become a really essential program for both food access at farmers markets and for farmers and their viability through farmers markets, that funding did run out toward the end of last year. And in part in response to that, we are actively seeking an appropriation for fiscal year 25 to boost that program and essentially get it back to the level of demand, and allow us to draw down more federal dollars in support of it too through the GusNIP program, which Ivy mentioned. So we're seeking an appropriation actively for FY25 of $478,500. Part of what that will also do is allow us to continue the Crop Cash Plus pilot, which has been a pilot that we started last year that expands the Crop Cash program to other foods beyond just fruit and vegetables at the farmers market. So eggs, milk, meat, to try to make it more of a full diet program, whereas under federal law, it is just applicable to produce.
So this is Crop Cash, and again, it's a part of the SNAP program. It only functions at farmers markets.
Yes, it's essentially a double your benefits program at farmers markets. Last year, we were able for some time to actually make it a triple your benefits program, which is incredibly impactful, obviously, for both users of the program and for farmers market vendors. And we've seen over the course of the 3+ years since the pandemic, the demand for this program specifically has quadrupled. So we are really hoping to see increased support from the state. And this was actually one of the examples I was hoping to give in terms of ways that state policy really can work in concert with federal policy and supplement and fill gaps where needed. So this is a great example to be thinking about when it comes to the Farm Bill and how it interacts with the legislature.
That was me. But...
Mike, you're all set.
Other questions?
Okay. Maybe you're off the hook.
All right.
Don't go far. Maddie, do you want to pick up on that with other parts of the Farm Bill?
Yeah, I would be happy to. And I actually do have a presentation to share, which I'll try to get through relatively quickly. But I am wondering, are we trying to leave a little bit of time following me for Carrie or anyone else to present?
We're flexible at the end of the meeting, so
okay.
Don't rush.
Okay, excellent. Let me try and share my. It doesn't look like I have the ability to share my screen. I don't know, Sidonia, if you want to share the presentation on your end, or if you can allow me to do it, I'm happy to.
I think you should be able to now.
We have it.
Okay, yeah, looks like I can. Oops. Let's see. Okay. Excellent. Well, I am just going to chat a little bit, as Ivy mentioned, about the other titles of the Farm Bill, which there are many. The 2018 Farm Bill specifically has 12 titles, which you can see here. Nutrition, as Ivy mentioned, is Title IV. There's also the commodities, conservation, trade, credit, rural development, research, extension, related matters, forestry, energy, horticulture, crop insurance, and the miscellaneous title, which actually, despite its name, has a lot of really critical programs for smaller scale, beginning, farmers of color, a lot of programs that we really care about at NOFA Vermont. And these titles are not set in stone in every Farm Bill. They can change over time, and the subject matter can change slightly over time too. I will say, despite what's largely true, that the Farm Bill is an incredibly comprehensive piece of legislation that has massive impacts on, what type of food is produced, who produces it, what we eat in this country, there are some surprising gaps in terms of what is not covered at all in the Farm Bill, and you can see some of them here. I will highlight particularly farm and food worker rights and protections are not covered by the Farm Bill. And as we've just been discussing, school meals are not covered in the Farm Bill. The FDA programs and funding are not part of the Farm Bill. So lots of other programs and funding sources that similarly have a large impact on land use and food production and the rights of those involved in the food system are not included in the Farm Bill typically. This comes from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, which NOFA Vermont is a member of. And Zach does a lot of really incredible work on the Farm Bill to center the needs of more diversified and sustainable and organic farmers. This shows you the funding in the Farm Bill from in the current Farm Bill that was authorized in 2018. As you can see, the vast majority of the funding in each Farm Bill actually goes to the nutrition title. And then you can see from there, the other sort of second largest slices of the pie are crop insurance, commodities, and conservation programs, with lots of other smaller programs making up that 1%, give or take. And again, despite the small amount of funding they receive, the programs in that little black sliver of the pie actually are very critical to a lot of farmers in Vermont, including those served by NOFA. So I'll just do a quick overview of our priorities, NOFA Vermont and our regional partners, which include the other NOFA chapters and MAFCA up in Maine. These are our priorities for the next Farm Bill. Investing in the integrity of organic and agroecological practices as a solution to the climate crisis, ensuring fair treatment and just livelihoods for farmers and workers throughout the system, investing in rural communities, increasing fairness and resilience of local supply chains and breaking up consolidation, centering racial justice across all programs and repairing past and ongoing racialized harm, promoting food sovereignty for disadvantaged communities and nutrition security for all, and eliminating the use of toxic substances on farmland while supporting a just transition for farmers. A little more detail about what exactly that translates to in terms of policies that we want to see in the Farm Bill. Under each of these headings, for example, expanding opportunities in organic, there are specific marker bills, which is a term for a bill that will get introduced throughout the course of Farm Bill reauthorization. That's not actually intended to be passed into law in and of itself, but where essentially certain provisions or the bill in its entirety is sort of inserted into the larger bill as it gets passed by the House and Senate Agricultural Committees. So Senator Welch last year introduced a bill called the Opportunities in Organic Act that would really make permanent some of the investments that USDA has recently made into developing organic markets, organic mentorship programs, and expanding the organic certification cost share program, which is a really critical one for organic producers here in Vermont. And then under each of these other headings, demanding climate action, supporting organic dairy, securing equitable access to land and credit, there are marker bills that have been introduced that would really meaningfully insert those goals into the next Farm Bill. In terms of how the Farm Bill currently impacts Vermont agriculture, it's really important to think about the slices of that pie chart related to the ag title specifically. So conservation, commodities, and crop insurance are sort of the largest slices of the pie when it comes to funding in the Farm Bill for farmers. Here in Vermont, there is data that has been really helpfully collected and published by the Environmental Working Group that shows that in 2021, the most recent data year that we have, 90% of farms in Vermont did not collect federal subsidy. So out of 6,808 farms on the agricultural census, 682 of those collected subsidy, according to the USDA. By far the largest amount of that subsidy goes through dairy programs. So in 2021, Vermont farms, 500 Vermont farms specifically, received $26.8 million in subsidy through dairy programs. The second largest funding pool that Vermont farmers accessed in 2021 was CFAP2, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. The second round of that, 625 farms accessed $3.6 million through that program. And then on down the line, there are smaller amounts of funding that farmers access through various disaster, emergency, and commodity support programs. I wanted to share a little bit with you about ways that the Farm Bill does, positively impact and support Vermont agriculture currently. So a huge way that the Farm Bill impacts Vermont farms in a positive way right now is through on-farm conservation programs, which are primarily funneled through NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And through the Inflation Reduction Act, there has been an additional investment of $20 billion into a few key conservation programs. And so that funding is going to allow a lot more farmers to access, hopefully funding through programs like EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, CSP, which you may have heard a little bit about last session, which is a conservation stewardship program. So that increased funding through the IRA for conservation programs we consider to be really critical. And we have been advocating along with our partners at NSAC to make sure that that funding stays in Title II, in the conservation title of the Farm Bill, and doesn't get gutted and used for other purposes. The second thing that is a really critical impact of the Farm Bill currently on Vermont agriculture is the organic provisions, which are in the horticulture title. So the Organic Certification Cost Share Program is a program that is funded, at least in part, through the Farm Bill that reimburses organic producers for a portion of their certification costs. That program is really critical, especially for farmers in Vermont, because we have often smaller scale producers who really depend on that reimbursement to keep themselves, financially viable. Whereas a larger producer, for example, a large scale organic producer or processor in another part of the country, that reimbursement, may matter less to them in terms of their bottom line when they're a larger producer. There has been also, like I mentioned, additional support for organic producers through the USDA's Transition to Organic Partnership Program in recent years. And that actually is currently allowing us at NOFA to build out a team, an organic practices team that will be supporting farmers, educating them around organic practices, helping them plan for climate resilience, helping them write climate plans for their farms. We have actually just hired 2 new staff members in the last month as part of that team, and that's being funded through the TOP program. So these programs, even though they make up a small slice of the pie in terms of the overall Farm Bill, are really critical and have an excellent impact oftentimes on Vermont agriculture. Another key area of positive support for ag in the Farm Bill is support for beginning farmers. So this acronym, as Ivy mentioned, the alphabet soup is definitely not limited to the nutrition title. It's alphabet soup. The Farm Bill is alphabet soup through and through. So this acronym is the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. And that is a program that supports a lot of mentorship programs and other programs to just help give resources to farmers that are just starting out. And we at NOFA have received funding through BFRDP for a lot of our programs that our farmer services team runs, like our Farm Beginnings program, our Journey Farmers program, which is a mentorship program. So it's a really critical one.
Okay.
And then, yep.
Sorry, can you just go back to the last slide for a second?
Sure.
How is the support for beginning farmers through that program? Is it all going through NOFA?
No, definitely not. I can't speak specifically to the ways that other organizations in Vermont are funded through the BFRDP and other beginning farmer programs, but lots of service providers like the Intervale and Center for an Agricultural Economy, Vital Communities access various programs that allow them also, UVM Extension, that allow them to do similar beginning farmer learning and cohort models as NOFA.
So you would, if an organization, any of those organizations wanted to participate in this program, there's an application process of some sort?
Yes, yep. There is an annual funding application, I believe, for the BFRDP program, which we've applied for and gotten many years, not every year. And that helps our farmer services team provide a lot of business technical assistance and marketing support for beginning farmers.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so some additional impacts, commodity price and income supports are certainly something that are accessed by some small percentage, generally, I would say, of Vermont ag producers. The Dairy Margin Coverage Program is a program that is funded and authorized through the Farm Bill. And that, again, is likely where the bulk of that $26.8 million comes down, although some of that might also be through commodity programs. I don't know the specific breakdown there. I will say, I think you've heard some amount about this from the Agency of Agriculture in the wake of flooding last year, but crop insurance programs are certainly in place in Vermont, as they are everywhere. But generally speaking, our farms are not very well served by crop insurance. Crop insurance on the whole is designed to support farms that are less diversified, that are, simpler essentially in their production models, and they are much harder to access for farms that are more diversified or that are using alternative business models, which we are seeing increasingly as beginning farmers struggle to access land and capital. So, and then lastly, I'll just say nutrition programs. As Ivy was mentioning, those nutrition programs like GusNIP and SNAP also are very important sources of support for Vermont farmers. We hosted a few meetings with NOFA members, most of whom were farmers, back in November, and several farmers specifically brought up the importance of the Crop Cash program to them at their farmers markets. They noted that as NOFA has grown that program and as it's seen more funding and been expanded to other product types, they have really seen an impact from that expansion on their farm businesses. So I don't, it's oftentimes kind of in the way that we're doing today. The nutrition title and the agricultural titles of the Farm Bill are really worked on it very separately, but it's very important also, I think, for you all and all of us to understand the ways that nutrition programs really, really matter to farmers as well. And then, oh, did someone have a question?
I actually do.
Yes.
It's a very simple question, Maddie. What's the acronym for the New Farm program? You went ahead faster than I could take a note there. It's a
I'm sorry, for which program?
New Farmer program.
Beginning farmers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's BFRDP. So it's the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program.
BFRDP.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of this slide here if you want to.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, it is, there are a lot of acronyms involved in learning about the Farm Bill. So I do also just want to highlight really who is not currently very well served by the Farm Bill. Again, you can sort of see this even in the pie chart earlier, the types of farms that generally, a lot of which we have in Vermont, smaller scale, more diversified, using organic practices, using alternative business models increasingly. Most of the programs that serve those farmers are in that little black sliver that gets about 1% of the overall funding. So it's not as if that farms in Vermont aren't getting any support through the Farm Bill, but on the whole, the vast majority of the funding in the Farm Bill is going to larger scale, more monoculture farms. So specifically, like I list here, smaller scale, more diversified farmers, farmers of color. USDA has a long and very well documented history of discrimination against farmers of color, beginning farmers, LGBTQ farmers, farm workers, and farms using alternative ownership and business structures. And just to give you a little bit more background on some of these bullet points here, as an example, to be eligible for a beginning farmer loan from FSA, all members of an LLC have to be related by blood or marriage. That's one of the policies that is in place that really disenfranchises a significant number of farmers who are trying to access these programs and really only work for a somewhat antiquated model, I would say, of kind of family farm ownership. I think increasingly farmers that I talk to feel like that model is not necessarily working for them anymore. There's, the expectation that both members of a married couple in household are the figureheads, and co-operating and co-owning a farm together is just, if that works, and it still does for some families, of course that's wonderful, but our policies need to be updated to reflect the different ways that people are entering into farm businesses together, and that don't rely on these historical ideas of what a family farm looks like. Another one I will say, and I don't think they would mind me sharing this, but the Intervale Community Farm is another really great example. So ICF is structured as a consumer cooperative, and as such, they cannot access any USDA program. They can't access money through EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which is a really heavily used program in Vermont that a lot of farmers, for example, use to support the construction of high tunnels. They have had to essentially fundraise through their community and just through their own, farm revenues to build high tunnels, because the USDA will not support their business model. So there are a lot of really sorely needed updates to the Farm Bill to recognize the ways that people are doing business as farms today.
Patty, can you just pause there? Because I think
Sure.
that's kind of shocking, and maybe everyone else was aware of it, but so I think I understood what you were saying about who would not qualify. Just want to be clear on what they wouldn't qualify for. So if two people who are not related by blood or marriage have a partnership or an LLC, own a farm together, they don't qualify for any programs under the Farm Bill, anything you've just discussed?
I can't say that they wouldn't qualify for anything. That example that I gave about the blood or marriage requirement is specifically an FSA beginning farmer loan. And, again, FSA is a really important lender for a lot of farm businesses, and that particular provision just makes that beginning farm loan much less accessible to a large number of people. But I can't say that same stipulation applies to every USDA program. But I will say, again, to the example of the Intervale, that because of their consumer co-op structure, they are largely carved out of any and all USDA program funding, loans, conservation programs, et cetera.
Thank you. Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you, Maddie. These 6 categories, which you've just outlined, going back to last session, we took a great deal of testimony from a number of representatives from some of these diverse, smaller, new farmers that, rights and democracy groups, LGBTQ farmers, all sorts of very small farmers wanting to be well served here in Vermont. I felt our committee listened carefully and even stood up some initiatives to try to have some of these small new categories funded. What can we, or what can NOFA VT do to influence adapting the Farm Bill to better serve these in Vermont, what were a critical demand or significant demand?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I actually intended, and I'll do that now as a partial answer to your question, to give some updates on some of the work that we specifically at NOFA Vermont with lots of partners have been doing in this Farm Bill reauthorization cycle. This is not necessarily maybe the group that you're asking about, Representative Lipsky, but I will say in terms of organic dairy, and I also want you all to know that organic dairy producers who have benefited from the emergency relief that you all authorized last year are so grateful to you and to this committee specifically for your support of those funds. And in recognition that we at NOFA and that those farms and that the entire industry doesn't want to see that kind of financial crisis again, we've been working with a group of organic dairy producers and producer associations from around the country for almost a year now. And in collaboration with Senator Welch, we developed this bill called the O'Dairy Act, which you may have heard about. And that bill would, if it passed in the Farm Bill, improve organic dairy data collection, which is sorely needed and has been needed for decades. It would at least direct USDA to research and propose a safety net program that works for organic dairy producers. It would increase investment in regional processing infrastructure by regionally owned processors as a way to increase competition and market opportunities for producers. And it would expand emergency programs to better support organic dairy producers. So that's a bill that's been introduced by Senator Welch now that we are advocating for to be included in the Farm Bill. Another one that I'll just talk about briefly is the Weather Act, which Senator Welch is going to be officially introducing in a couple of weeks. And that bill takes a really interesting approach. It would create or direct USDA to research at least the creation of a weather index-based insurance program. So that would essentially pay out on a fairly rapid basis within 30 days when certain indices around extreme moisture or drought or extreme heat or high wind was met in a particular county or area. And the idea behind that is basically to create an insurance product that will better meet the needs of farmers in a changing climate, because we saw very clearly in the wake of the flooding in July that our current insurance products are not working by and large. So that's a couple of examples of very concrete work that we've done to get certain policies improved. There is also really a pretty substantial national coalition through NSAC. I'm also part of the National Organic Coalition that works year after year to actively advocate for programs that will better serve smaller scale, beginning, diversified organic producers. So that is very much happening. And my last slide actually also is really touching on, I think, your question, which is the ways in which I think the Vermont legislature can create policies that complement what's in the Farm Bill. Some of that is filling gaps or supplementing, in the example of crop cash being expanded to allow folks to use it for other types of other foods beyond fruit and vegetables. Another example of a state supplement to a Farm Bill program is the state supplement to the Conservation Stewardship Program, which was the recommendation coming out of the Payment for Ecosystem Services working group that I served on. So essentially what that state working group decided was that rather than create a new program that would pay Vermont producers for measurable improvements in ecosystem services, we collectively decided the Conservation Stewardship Program does a pretty great job at that right now. It has, provisions in place that allow a whole farm assessment of how natural resources are being treated on the farm. And it has the ability to actually pay farmers a pretty significant amount for the efforts that they're making to improve and protect natural resources on their farm. So that's a great example of kind of a state supplement that doesn't supplant or replace federal policy, but just improves on it and makes it more accessible and more meaningful to producers here in Vermont. And then lastly, it's really critical to remember that the Farm Bill will come around again, and the state has the opportunity to create new programs, to create new policies that can inform future Farm Bills and federal policy. You could think of it as like the trickle up effect, and that's a lot of how these Farm Bill programs get made. I actually work with someone from an organization called the Land Stewardship Project that's based out in Minnesota, who really were the originators of both the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program and the Conservation Stewardship Program. Through their work on the ground with young farmers and with farmers that were, needing improved conservation programs, they were able to advocate for the creation of those programs in the Farm Bill. And I think we have the ability to do the same thing here in Vermont.
Representative O'Brien.
Maddie, what's the relationship between the federal milk marketing order and the Farm Bill, if any?
I'm not an expert on the FMMO. You should probably talk to Laura Ginsburg. I will say hearing Laura Ginsburg speak on the federal milk marketing order is the closest I think I've ever come to fully understanding it. So I would recommend, if you want to really get into it, inviting Laura in to speak on that. There have, I know, been hearings over the past several months about the federal milk marketing order. I do believe that that is included in the Farm Bill and reauthorized in the Farm Bill, because these hearings that they've been holding in DC over the past few months have been considering tweaks to the federal milk marketing order.
Maddie, is there, and maybe this is a question for the group or for Ivy actually, but is there anyone who's responsible for making sure that Vermont farmers are able to take advantage of whatever opportunities there are in the Farm Bill, whether it's the current Farm Bill or the next reauthorized Farm Bill? Just thinking about how we wonder sometimes whether the programs that are offered through the state are, whether our farmers are aware of all of them. And I imagine that's just even that much more complex with the Farm Bill.
It can be, and I would say my answer to that is that generally speaking, it's a combination of community-based organizations like NOFA, like all of the service providers that are a part of the Farm Viability Network, and federal agencies themselves. So, NRCS communicates directly out to the farm community to the extent that they're able when they have a deadline approaching for a CSP enrollment, for example. But I think it's really critical that outreach and education around all of these programs is improved, and that we as community-based organizations, the Agency of Agriculture, all of the incredible people that are working to support Vermont agriculture are a part of that network of educating farmers and eaters and SNAP beneficiaries about what is available to them in as clear a way as possible. Because I do think you heard, me and Ivy both speak about the alphabet soup of the Farm Bill, and I think it can feel very dizzying to farmers, and I'm sure to folks also trying to access various food benefits, to understand where to go to access various benefits and to get their questions answered. I think that is a perennial challenge.
Wilson.
The one list you had said you were demanding climate action. Is that from the UN?
So if you were on the NOFA Vermont website, which I should have just put up here, looking at our Farm Bill page, if you clicked on we have a little drop down under that demand climate action section. And what we have there is a link to a bill that's called the Agriculture Resilience Act, which is a bill that has been advocated for by the National Sustainable Ag Coalition and a lot of our national partners that would make investments in more climate-friendly models of farming, which we certainly at NOFA think organic should be squarely included in. And a lot of what that looks like is actually, at least in part, what was done through the Inflation Reduction Act, increasing investments in conservation programs that really serve farmers very well currently and that are by and large oversubscribed. There is a lot more demand for those programs than there is funding available currently. So we really need to, and I spoke a little bit about this in my testimony about flood impacts last week, we need to both be able to respond and support farmers in the wake of natural disasters, and we also need to have better planning and better support for farmers to be able to plan so that their individual operations can be more resilient, and also can actually work to help mitigate some of the effects of climate change that we're seeing. And that's what the Agriculture Resilience Act would do.
But is it from the UN?
Not specifically. Not specifically that I'm aware of. I don't know that it is. I don't know that the Ag Resilience Act, although it might, align with specific UN climate goals. That's a fair question, but I don't think that's the whole story.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative O'Brien.
Just quickly, Maddie, does cannabis come up at all in the Farm Bill, or is it completely verboten?
Cute.
No, no, unfortunately, because cannabis is still treated as a Schedule I drug at the federal level. There's, nothing really to speak of about cannabis in the Farm Bill that I know of, at least.
Never happened.
Great, thank you, Maddie. Stay with us just for another minute or two if you can.
Sure, I'll stop my screen share, but thank you for having
Okay.
me again.
I just wanted to invite, we have a couple other witnesses who might want to give some testimony. I'm not sure. Carrie, was there anything that you wanted to add? You hadn't come prepared to say anything. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
No, it's fine. I'm here to answer questions. If there are additional questions specifically about TFAP and CSFP, because those are the programs that the Vermont Food Bank implements on behalf of the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
And I know there were some questions about what's included in those things, and I'm happy to follow up by email or to just answer some questions right now.
There were a couple of questions earlier. Does anybody have more questions you want to bring up now?
I just had a question about the structure. It seems like there's a whole bunch of different programs, and on the actual user end, are they all funneled through, like, is the user, can they just use a single card? Is the EBT card, or they have to, is there like multiple cards? Like, how does that all work for like the different, like, is Crop Cash, do you swipe your EBT card, or is that something, I'm just wondering how that all, the mechanics of it work.
I can, do you want me to witness in it?
Come on up.
Okay.
State your name for the record.
So hi, I'm Carrie Saylor. I live in Linden, Vermont, and I work for the Vermont Food Bank. Each nutrition program essentially has its own set of eligibility guidelines, often its own application process, and its own implementation. So SNAP, which is 3 Squares Vermont, like Ivy was talking about earlier, is one program that uses an EBT card, and you can, if you look at the different cards, it has like a nice Vermont landscape on it, and it'll say 3 Squares Vermont. And so that's one card, and that can be used at retailers for certain foods. WIC, which is not a Farm Bill program, also has an EBT card portion where people can use WIC, which is for families with children 5 years old and under, or pregnant people. That can be used for a different set of foods purchased at retailers, but is more limited than what the EBT card is for SNAP. And then a program like CSFP, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, that is the program that has no choice for people who are receiving that food. So they get a box. It contains dairy, shelf-stable foods like dried beans and rice. It'll contain like apple juice and like a pouch of chili or canned meat and some canned vegetables. And they pick that box up at one of the distribution sites or at their stash site on a monthly basis. And what that box has in it is what they get. And if they're a vegetarian and they get a can of canned beef, they find a friend. Right, so there's very limited choice in a program like that. But that's for people who are eligible at 130% of the federal poverty level. Those folks are also eligible for 3 Squares Vermont if they apply, and it's a separate application process. So each of these pieces often requires the end user to go through some sort of application or access process. So even for TFAP, which is the Emergency Food Access Program, where the food bank orders and stores food and then distributes it through about 80 of our network partners, people have to sign a self affidavit that says they're eligible for that program at the food shelf or food pantry that they use. And so that requires a separate point of access from the CSFP program, which is a separate point of access from using a SNAP or EBT card. And that's why it's really critically important for folks like the Vermont Nutrition Coalition, when we do the Farm Bill reauthorization process, to get input from all those people, because they all have different experiences and different levels of knowledge and, are telling us sort of different needs that they all have from this huge federal package. And it's our job to sort of help parse those and say to our federal delegation, like, this would work better for people in our community if these changes were made, or if this eligibility was aligned, or if you only have one application, or whatever those pieces are, right? And it can be confusing to understand the different ways to use all these different food programs.
Nicole?
Here, just to clarify, it's my understanding that crop cash also applies to not just, summertime farmers markets, but also farm stands that are eligible.
That's actually a better question for Maddie because NOFA implements crop cash. And so I actually didn't address crop cash in my answer to you. Crop cash is like a piece of paper that you get that you exchange for credit at one of those sites, right? So because of the nature and who's implementing these different programs, like the state implements SNAP, so they have the resources and the capacity to put that on a card and do it that way. Like community organizations like ours don't have that technology, right? We don't have that ability.
Our crop cash at the Grand Isle Farmers Market, they hand in their coupon and they get little wooden coins. And then it's like a 3-to-1 ratio. So they walk around with a handful of coins and they get $30 worth of produce for $10, which is fairly remarkable.
I know.
It's a great deal.
And then there's a process where those coins are turned, this is probably vague, those coins are turned into NOFA or
Yep, and then the market gets reimbursed, yeah.
So, Maddie, did you have an answer to the question about farm stands?
We do have a farm stand match program that allows folks to use their EBT cards at certain farm stands. I believe that is separate from crop cash, but I can find out the answer to that, Representative Cole, and let you know for sure.
Thank you. Oh, I just bring it up just because it speaks exactly to what we're looking to do here in the community. It's like double the impact to our small businesses that are local, and usually the foods offered there are not the processed stuff that are produced, hundreds of miles away. Like it's just such a important asset, like to keep these dollars in our state and keep people healthy too.
And I just want to add, I really was struck by farmers specifically bringing this up, unprompted, as one of the things that NOFA does that really matters to them. It's sort of easy to talk theoretically about crop cash and our farm share program, which is subsidized CSA shares, as sort of the win-win for farmers and for food access. But to hear farmers specifically go out of their way to talk about the difference that they see in their revenue because of crop cash being used at markets, it's very striking.
Representative O'Brien and then Representative Pearl.
I just was thinking about this during this testimony today of an animal welfare question, whether in Hunger Free Vermont pets are part of the thought equation because families are much part of families. Whether any of these federal programs you can use those dollars to buy pet food.
Pet food, yes, I hear what you're saying. No, it is not. You may be able to answer the SNAP question more specifically, but no. But the Vermont Food Bank separately provides pet food to our network partners because of that reason, because there isn't a way to cover that cost. And it's actually one of the areas that we get the most requests for when that isn't available. We have a partnership with Positive Pantry nationally, and it's a good point. And it's also the same challenge goes for non-food items like shampoo, soap, dish detergent, toilet paper, diapers, menstrual products, all of those things that are not covered but are still costs for people and are related to grocery shopping. Because the goal is that people just want to go to the grocery store like everyone else and afford what they need, like, everyone else.
Let's take one more question, Representative Pearl.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, I was curious about the legal structure behind the funding for the sort, like what you can use. I was just thinking about the whole equal to status in the other elements of the things that we talk about. But and I'm sure this has been looked at and probably would be heavily lobbied against. But there's no way, obviously, probably to pull down money from federal programs and have a way to use them on a state level of our own guidelines, just thinking like to use, to put more money into things like crop cash, you know, from, you know, because it would be like if we're providing nutrition, make the argument that we're providing nutrition for people and just doing it in a better way type of thing. I don't know if that makes any sense what I'm saying, but like, probably not. Basically, like, take the same dollars, like, has it been tried before to lobby for, taking the same money, say we get $10 million for the, you know, SNAP program. And if we were to have some structure that was like an equal to status of the federal nutrition guidelines, and we were to say, give us those $10 million, and we're gonna spend them, we're gonna allocate them for certain things like more crop cash.
Oh.
Is that making?
Yes, I think I see what you're saying. So you're saying instead of SNAP dollars going onto those EBT cards, a portion of that would be used for a program like Crop Cash?
Yeah.
With that program, that goes directly to beneficiaries. So it goes directly to people who receive it. And so you'd be saying to people, I actually think I know how to use that money better, and we're going to take some of your benefit away and use it a different way. So actually, I don't think that would fly with a lot of people. And I don't think it's within the structure of that program, but Crop Cash is paid for through a different grant program where there is a state match for it. Yeah. So there is sort of some, depending on the different titles, there are sometimes state matches built into those funding sources. And so they can or can't be more flexible. It really depends on the specificity of the program's funding source and what nutrition title it comes through and which line it, you know, it's endlessly complicated, and also we could probably spend the rest of the month on it.
Well, thanks to all of our witnesses for all your very interesting testimony, and it helped me understand things a little bit better. Maddie, did you have something?
I just wanted to circle back, Representative Cole, on your question that it is the Farm Stand Match Program is the same federal funding source, at least in part. It's funded through GSNP, but the rules are slightly different. So it is a somewhat separate program with a separate name. The Farm Stand Match Program is somewhat separate from Crop Cash, but similar federal funding sources. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
And it's also Farm Bill.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again, all of you, and committee members. If you know there are still outstanding questions, or if this raises thoughts on where places we could fill in those gaps, that's a good way to be thinking about how this is useful. We're going to take a break. Why don't we break until 2?